Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well. We got a tropical outlook for you guys today, and things are starting to look a little bit more interesting. I know at the surface there's not much to really worry about. I mean, if you look on the main part of the screen, there's a small area with a 10% chance of development, but nothing to really write home to about this system. There are a couple interesting details that we'll get into in just a moment with this. And then if you look at the satellite imagery here, I'm going to set that in motion again. If you look really closely, you see a lot of activity just across the board here. You can see the main development region, there's activity beginning to fire up here and there. Right now, I would say that the conditions over towards this area are pretty much unconducive for development. Like I said, it's really close to home where things look a little bit more favorable, but even so, we're still dealing with a little bit of issues there. Now, this feature that we're looking at on the main part of the screen that has a 10% chance of development, it's a lot like that last system, 93L. But the thing that I want to make note of, and there's a couple of key differences here, and this does not ensure greater potential for development, is this area of spin that we're seeing is a little bit further south than what we were seeing with the last one. The system looks a little bit better, but it's still very poorly organized. So maybe this might have a better opportunity ish, but I don't think I'm ready to just jump on that bandwagon just yet. Either way, it's going to kind of be similar to the last system. There's going to be increased shower and storm potential across the deep south, and especially over towards the Florida Peninsula and the Panhandle. And then we're still seeing plenty of activity that could be possible over towards Louisiana and Texas. We want this to stay away from areas around South and East Central Texas, i.e., towards Houston, Kirk County, those areas. So definitely need to be on guard, but hopefully nothing major comes of this. But I'm going to go ahead and take the radar off the screen, or the satellite off the screen here. And we're going to go ahead and get into the main part of the forecast here. Before we get into that, the reason why I'm still concerned about this area is, of course, the Gulf waters. Gulf waters are incredibly warm, still bath water basically at this point. 30 degrees Celsius is almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, off the coastlines, it's right at 90 degrees. So, like I said, there is genuine reason to be concerned. The Atlantic itself is really starting to heat up at this juncture, just across the board here, especially as we get closer and, well, honestly, past the 60-degree west line, which is right here. The reason why this line is such a big deal, because notice what's past it as we look further towards the west. It's almost entirely land. So the concern ends up becoming, at this point, once we get a storm that fires up past here, where is it going to go? So definitely still need to be on guard, but thankfully so far this season has been relatively slow. There's been 3 named storms that have had minimal impact up to this point. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our models here. Of course, you know the drill. GFS ensemble on the main part of the screen, Euros on the top right corner. We're going to set both of these into motion here. And what I want you to pay attention to is the wind shear on this map. So we're going to speed both of these up too. But what you'll notice is wind shear is really starting to slow down here as we get towards the very end of the month. And this is right about on schedule, I would say, for peak season here. So I'm concerned that business is going to pick up. I've been seeing more convection than what we've seen in recent time. So as a result, we're, like I said, right on schedule. Things could get interesting as we go forward here. No reason to be concerned yet at this point. I'll tell you if there's ever a need to be, but right now we're looking good. Just a small area of concern maybe over here, and I wouldn't even be too concerned with that as of yet. That's off of the East Florida Peninsula's coast here as of right now. Notice wind shear remains pretty light over towards the Gulf. That's due in large part to the ridge. I'm actually going to pull the satellite back up so that way you can see it. And I think I actually closed it out like an idiot. But if we were to look on satellite, you would actually see clockwise spin over here towards the southeast, and we're going to continue to see that. And that ridge, what it effectively does, it actually helps keep the wind shear a little bit lighter over here towards the Gulf. So when we have ridges over here, we always need to be more watchful, especially if we have any sort of storm system that goes to the central U.S. If we get something that forms on the adjacent flanks to the south here in the Gulf, could be opportunities for development. Or if anything clears the northeast and gets caught in that ridge, it spins back towards the west, which is what we've seen with the last system and we'll likely see with this one as well. And that trend is showing on both GFS and the Euro at this point. A little bit more active on the Euro, a little bit more wind shear starting out, but at the end of the day though, we both end up seeing the same old song and dance. The wind shear is a little bit stronger there, but it's still relatively light. Is it conducive enough for development is the question at this point. So still a lot of variables left to hash out here, but as a whole, I would say that we are progressing along into peak part of hurricane season. Waters are warm, so just need to be on watch for any sort of tropical wave that ends up developing. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take a look at the moisture content over the Atlantic basin as a whole. Now if we look at both GFS and Euro, notice Gulf has plenty of moisture, but we're still battling with some of that dry air as we go further and further along here. And I really think it's that dry air that's going to help keep things rather limited. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on where this high pressure ends up migrating to. If it migrates off to the north and east like we're seeing this one do in the GFS, that could create for a more interesting scenario as we get into the month of August and even further beyond if that trend were to hold. Now this is where we're still uncertain because Euro isn't showing that kind of scenario popping up here. So the problem that we're going to be having here is if we can't get model disagreement, we're just not going to be completely certain as to what to expect here. Notice that we still see plenty of moisture plumes coming off of the West African coast on both the models here. But the problem, like I said, again, the problem really is going to be this high pressure area. Or it could be our saving grace really at this point. Another interesting thing that I've made note of here as I look at this as well is we do see little pockets where we end up seeing potential for some short-term development here. So we could get some additional named storms in the North Atlantic here too. Will they be of much impact to anybody? Probably not, but either way, this will keep this stat line going because we are expecting about 13 named storms. We're 3 names in. So, well, actually I think it was like 14. Somewhere between 14 and 17. But either way, the stat line kind of continue. Well, we're still trying to maintain the stat line here, so to speak. But as far as impacts are concerned right now to land, I'm not too concerned at this moment in time. But a couple things that I'm also making note of here as we look at the ensemble members is that if we go to the really both of these ensembles here, is that both of them show some sort of favorability for a feature that pops up in the Gulf here, at least within the next 5 to 7 days. So we go further beyond that point, all the attention seems to go a little bit more over towards the Caribbean here in the main development region in the Atlantic. So more interested in seeing what happens there. It's a little bit of convection that seems like it starts to try and flare up even over here towards this Panama Canal region here. And I think this becomes more of a factor, I'd say, for the Eastern Pacific. I wouldn't really be concerned with any U.S. impacts at this time. We'll wait and see how things pan out with that, but it looks like business across the board does seem to be at least trying to pick up. No guarantees with this, of course, and as we know, the further into range we get, the less certainty that we have. So last thing we're going to do here before we wrap this video up is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the ensemble group here from Weather Nerds, and what we're seeing is, of course, as we mentioned before, this area here could be a point of interest as we go within the next week here. Within the little cracks of where that ridge is, we could get something to briefly develop. It could become a named storm. The odds of it are very low, but we've had a couple surprises. In fact, the storm has formed here. We ended up getting a named storm during the early part of the season in June. But what I really want you to pay attention to as the loop comes back around is notice that we do have a few models that favor this developing into a small storm at best. I don't even know if it becomes a named storm at this point due to the fact that we have such weak low pressures. The lower the pressure number, the stronger the storm, and going we're barely going under 1,000 here. So usually a tropical storm would be like right at the threshold of about 1,000 or below. So I wouldn't. So like I said, I'm not really sure just what we could deal with or what intensity it could be should it even develop. I would give this one maybe slightly better chance compared to the last system that we saw. And then of course, one thing that also has captured my eye is of course over towards this main development region. We have this one persistent model, and it could more than likely be an outlier, but we have one persistent run here that is showing some development that pops up in the main development region, and this one low that travels all the way into the Caribbean. Now, do I think that scenario plays out exactly? Not really. It's kind of hard to say. We're looking all the way to the end of the 10-day range by the time this were to play out here, and there's a lot of room for change there. But one thing that is consistent, however, is multiple low pressures kind of developing within this area. So it definitely kind of makes me raise a brow, if you will. So definitely going to be paying closer attention to this area in the coming days and weeks ahead here. And I think you should as well. Getting towards the peak of hurricane season. We already know the drill. We've been here before. Right now we're sitting pretty. Let's hope we can keep it that way. But that's all I got for you guys in this video. Make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button. And I just want you to know, appreciate you guys. And I will see you all a little bit later today, most likely. Till then, take care.